What would you do if your teacher publicly called you out, laughed at your intelligence, and gave you a near impossible math problem just to watch you fail? That's exactly what happened to Jordan, a 15-year-old black student standing in front of his entire honors class, with 24 pairs of eyes watching, waiting for him to crumble. But what unfolded next left the entire school, and even the math department, in complete shock. Before we dive into this incredible story, comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss stories that prove genius doesn't discriminate. But sadly, people still do. Let's begin. Jordan Williams stood in the back corner of room 207, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, trying to hide the sharp pain radiating from his lower back. The classroom buzzed with low chatter and the faint scratch of pencils on paper, but Jordan wasn't really part of that noise. He was invisible, and yet somehow always on display. The only black student in his honors math class. The scholarship kid surrounded by children of doctors, lawyers, and CEOs. Every movement he made, every time he raised his hand, felt like it carried twice the weight, twice the risk. Ms. Carter, the teacher, with her perfectly pressed beige blazer blonde hair twisted into a sleek bun, and voice that could slice through steel, glanced at him with her usual mix of annoyance and thinly veiled contempt. Mr. Williams, she called her tone, sugary but sharp. Are we choosing to stand again today, or is this another silent protest I should know about? Several students snickered. Tyler Brooks, sitting front and center as always, turned to his friends and stage whispered, "Maybe he just doesn't know how chairs work." A few more laughs followed. Jordan's cheeks flushed hot, but he didn't flinch. "No, ma'am," he answered quietly. "I'm just more comfortable this way." Comfortable was a lie. The real reason, 3 weeks ago, during one of Miss Carter's infamous outbursts over classroom disruptions, she'd shoved him hard into a desk. His back hadn't been the same since. His grandmother had wanted to report it, threatened to take it to the school board. But Jordan had begged her not to. He couldn't risk losing his scholarship to Ridgewood Academy, the elite private school that was supposed to be his ticket to a better future. Miss Carter moved to the board, picking up a piece of chalk with dramatic flair. "Well, then," she said, writing out today's topic in big looping letters, quadratic equations. Jordan opened his textbook, flipping to the marked page, though he hardly needed to. He'd mastered quadratics back in middle school. The real challenge wasn't the math. It was surviving the 50 minutes of subtle digs and open mockery Miss Carter managed to lace into every lesson. Across the room, Jasmine Patel caught his eye and gave him a small sympathetic nod. They weren't exactly friends, but as one of the other scholarship students she understood. They both did. Miss Carter tapped her manicured nails against the chalkboard. "Let's see. Who's brave enough to come solve this next problem?" Her eyes scanned the room, and predictably landed right on Jordan. Her smile stretched wider. "Well, Mr. Williams, since you're already standing, why don't you come show us what you know?" The class went quiet. Jordan froze. His heart began to pound louder than the ticking wall clock. He hated this part. The part where it always became a performance, a trap. He opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, Miss Carter's next words sliced through the air. "Or, unless, of course, you'd like to admit your limitations." The word limitations hung there. Heavy, deliberate. And with that, the classroom dynamic shifted. This wasn't just a question about math anymore, it was something else entirely. Jordan tightened his grip on his pencil, staring down at his notebook. He had a choice to make. The air in room 207 felt thick, almost electric. Jordan's palms started to sweat. His lower back burned a constant reminder of why he stayed standing in the first place. As he hesitated, Tyler couldn't help but pile on. "Maybe the math's too advanced for him," he said with a smirk. "Or maybe it's just too advanced for affirmative action students." A few students gasped softly, some snickered nervously, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jordan clenched his jaw. The insult wasn't new. Tyler had been making those little comments all semester, always loud enough for others to hear, but never quite loud enough for Miss Carter to acknowledge. Except this time. Miss Carter didn't even bother pretending not to hear. She smiled. Not at Jordan, but at Tyler. And that stung worse than the comment itself. Jordan's stomach twisted. In that moment, he thought about the past few weeks, the sleepless nights spent lying on a heating pad, praying the pain would ease before morning. The whispered conversations with his grandmother, her face lined with worry, but filled with unwavering pride. The hours spent sneaking onto university math forums at night, solving equations, posting anonymous solutions, building an online identity that nobody in this school would ever believe belonged to a 15-year-old black kid from the East Side. He could feel every eye in the room on him now. Jasmine's gaze full of empathy, Tyler's full of smug amusement, Miss Carter's unreadable but sharp like glass. Jordan shifted his weight, wincing as the pain shot up his spine. A voice in his head screamed, "Stay quiet, let it go, sit down, don't make it worse." But then, another memory hit him. Last week after school, on a quiet walk home, his grandmother had said something. "Baby, one day you're going to have to stop shrinking yourself just to make other people comfortable, even if it costs you." Taking a slow, shaky breath, Jordan stepped forward. His sneakers squeaked softly against the floor tiles as he made his way to the front of the room. But just as he reached the board, Miss Carter suddenly paused. "Oh, wait," she said, turning back to the chalkboard. With exaggerated strokes, she wiped away the simple quadratic problem and replaced it with something new, something longer, more complex, multivariable calculus. An audible gasp rippled through the classroom. Jordan's heart sank. This wasn't part of today's lesson. This wasn't even part of the school's curriculum at this level. Miss Carter capped the chalk, turned and crossed her arms. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Since Mr. Williams seems so eager, let's see if he can handle something more appropriate for his confidence level." The room froze. Even Tyler's smirk wavered, eyebrows raising in mild disbelief. Jasmine's mouth parted like she wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Jordan stared at the board. The equation glared back at him. A complex, college-level differential equation, clearly written as a joke. A punishment. A warning. Know your place. His pulse pounded in his ears. "Are you joking, ma'am?" he asked quietly, breaking the silence. Miss Carter's smile widened, her next words sharp enough to cut. "No, Jordan, I'm not joking. Now, solve it. Or take your seat and admit your limitations." Her voice echoed in his mind. Admit your limitations. The whole room waited for his next move. Jordan's fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the chalk. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. This wasn't just about math anymore. It was about dignity. It was about proving, not just to them, but to himself, that he didn't belong in the back corner, not today. The chalk felt cold and powdery in Jordan's grip. He stared at the sprawling equation covering half the board. Integrals, derivatives, variables stacked on variables. This wasn't some textbook problem. This was intentional humiliation. Tyler leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, grinning wide, like he was about to witness the school year's most entertaining meltdown. Jasmine bit her lip, her eyes darting nervously between Jordan and the board. Jordan's breathing quickened. His mind felt like it was splitting in two. One half screamed, "Put the chalk down, sit back down, save yourself." The other half, the louder half, shouted back, "No more hiding." He glanced at Miss Carter. Her expression wasn't smug now. It was expectant, almost gleeful, like she was already rehearsing how she'd describe this disaster in the teacher's lounge later. Jordan closed his eyes for half a second. Images flashed through his mind. His grandmother setting out his clothes for school every morning, double-checking for wrinkles, saying, "You're going to walk in there like you own the place, baby." The hours he'd spent at the public library poring over college-level math books, while other kids played basketball outside. The late nights spent on online math forums, answering problems posted by university students under his anonymous username, Eastside Math Kid 23. Jordan opened his eyes. Slowly, he lifted the chalk to the board. The classroom leaned in, holding its collective breath. His hand trembled slightly at first, but then muscle memory took over. Step by step, line by line, he began breaking the equation apart. First, he simplified the inner expression, then applied the chain rule, integrated, differentiated, reorganized terms. The room grew eerily silent. The scribbles of chalk against slate echoed louder than any voice. Tyler's grin faltered. Jasmine sat up, straighter eyes widening. Even Miss Carter. Her folded arms slowly dropped to her sides as she stared at the unfolding solution. Jordan moved with a quiet, practiced rhythm. Each symbol flowed seamlessly into the next. Mistakes? None. Hesitations barely noticeable. When he reached the final step, he paused. For a brief second, he contemplated stopping, leaving the solution unfinished, making them wonder. But no, not today. With one last flick of his wrist, he underlined the final answer, clean, precise, unquestionable. Jordan set the chalk back on the ledge. He turned toward the class. His breathing still shallow, heart still pounding. But standing tall, the room remained frozen. Tyler's mouth hung slightly open. Jasmine exhaled audibly, a small smile creeping onto her face. Miss Carter. Her face had drained of color. She stepped closer to the board, scanning Jordan's work like she was searching desperately for some microscopic error. Her fingers trembled. Finally, her voice cracked the silence. There's a mistake here, somewhere. But the uncertainty in her tone betrayed her. Before she could continue, another voice cut in. From the open classroom door, deep, firm, authoritative, there's no mistake. Mr. Ramirez, the school's head of the math department, stood there, holding a cup of coffee. Eyes fixed on the board in disbelief. I was walking by, saw the equation, he continued stepping fully into the room. And I stayed to watch because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He approached the board, running his eyes over each line. "This solution is flawless," he said quietly, "both in method and in logic." A murmur rippled through the classroom. Jasmine grinned fully now. Tyler slumped back in his chair, face flushed. Miss Carter's hands curled into fists at her sides. Jordan stood there, not smiling, not gloating, just breathing. For the first time in weeks. The pain in his back felt distant, almost irrelevant. The only thing Jordan felt was something he hadn't tasted in a long time. Pride. As the bell rang, students began gathering their books in stunned silence. But no one left immediately. Most lingered, stealing glances at the board, at Jordan, and at Miss Carter's pale, frozen face. Jordan packed his notebook. Slowly, fingers still trembling slightly from adrenaline. "Jordan, wait up!" It was Jasmine. She caught up with him near the doorway, her voice low but urgent. That was unbelievable. she said, eyes shining with something between relief and admiration. I mean, how long have you been able to do that? Jordan shrugged awkwardly. I just study a lot, I guess. But that was an understatement. The truth. For years, math had been his escape. While other kids scrolled through social media or played video games, Jordan had spent late nights buried in problem sets meant for college sophomores. Forums like Math Exchange and Khan University became his second home. He wasn't just good at math, he was exceptional, a natural. But in this school, in this classroom, there was no room for that part of him to exist, being too smart and too black in the same body. It painted a target on his back. As he made his way toward his locker, Jordan's mind flashed back to that awful day 3 weeks ago. Ms. Carter, standing inches from his face, yelling about classroom disruptions, the sudden shove, the sharp crack of his spine against the desk corner, the stunned silence of the room. No witnesses brave enough to speak up, not even Jasmine. Back then, everyone was afraid, even Jordan. And that fear had kept him silent. Now, something had changed. By lunchtime, the news had spread. Snippets of whispered conversation followed him down the hallway. Did you see what he did? Miss Carter's face was priceless. I heard he solved something even Ramirez couldn't. Wait, isn't that kid on scholarship? Jordan sat alone in the cafeteria, as usual, unwrapping the peanut butter sandwich his grandmother had made before her hospital shift. From across the room, Tyler watched him. No jokes today, no laughter, just silence. Darius, a classmate from biology, slid into the seat across from him. I heard what happened, he said, eyes wide with disbelief. Dude, that was legendary. Jordan chuckled nervously. Don't make it a big thing. Darius grinned. Too late. It's already a big thing. Before Jordan could respond, his phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. Please come to my office after lunch. Mr. Ramirez. His stomach dropped. Was he in trouble? Was Ms. Carter already filing some kind of complaint? The thought made his hands shake again. But then, another memory surfaced. His grandmother's voice from last night, baby. You've spent too long dimming your light to make other people comfortable. One day, you'll shine so bright they'll have no choice but to notice. Jordan looked at the clock. 15 minutes until the end of lunch. He took one last bite of his sandwich, zipped up his bag, and stood. His back still ached, but this time, he stood tall, by choice. Jordan's footsteps echoed down the quiet hallway leading to the math department office. His palms were sweaty, heart pounding against his ribs like a warning drumbeat. He paused at the door, took a steadying breath, and knocked. Come in, Mr. Ramirez's voice called. Jordan stepped inside. Mr. Ramirez sat behind his desk, a stack of papers in front of him, but for once he wasn't looking at them. He was staring directly at Jordan, not with irritation, not with suspicion, but with something closer to curiosity, and maybe even respect. Sit down, Jordan, Mr. Ramirez said, motioning to the chair across from him. Jordan eased into the seat, carefully wincing as his back protested. For a few moments, Mr. Ramirez said nothing, just tapped his pen against his coffee mug, watching Jordan. Finally, he spoke. I've taught here for 18 years, he began. I've seen a lot of students freeze up when challenged, seen some melt under pressure, but what I saw today... He leaned forward, lowering his voice. That wasn't luck, that wasn't memorization, that was mastery. Jordan swallowed hard. I've been studying a lot, on my own. Mr. Ramirez nodded slowly. I figured, that solution, it wasn't textbook. You used an alternative method on the final step. Something we don't teach here, something I wouldn't expect from a sophomore, or even a senior. Jordan shifted uncomfortably. Am I in trouble? Mr. Ramirez let out a short laugh. No, quite the opposite. He opened a file on his desk. Inside were printed screenshots posts from an online mathematics forum. Jordan recognized them instantly. Solutions he'd written under his anonymous username. Mr. Ramirez tapped the papers. Your username is Eastside Math Kid 23, right? Jordan's heart skipped. How did you? I moderate that forum, Mr. Ramirez said with a wry smile. Been following your posts for over a year, always wondered who you were. Never imagined it was a student, let alone one sitting right down the hall from my office. Jordan blinked, unsure what to say. Mr. Ramirez continued. I've already contacted the principal. Given what happened today, and what I now know about your independent work, I'm recommending you for immediate evaluation for advanced placement, possibly even dual enrollment with the state university. Jordan's stomach flipped. What? But, I'm only 15. Mr. Ramirez shrugged. Age doesn't matter when your brain operates 3 grades ahead of the curriculum. Jordan sat in stunned silence. The words felt surreal. After weeks of being humiliated, ignored, talked over, now, suddenly, people were seeing him. Before he could respond, there was a knock at the door. Miss Carter stepped inside. Her face was tight. Her lipstick, usually perfect, looked smudged at the corner. For the first time, she didn't carry herself like she owned the room. Mr. Ramirez, she said stiffly, may I speak with you about today's incident? Her eyes flickered toward Jordan, then quickly away. Mr. Ramirez stood up. We'll discuss it shortly, he said firmly. But for now, I suggest you start reviewing your teaching records from the last semester. Miss Carter's eyes narrowed. Her mouth opened like she was about to protest. But one glance at Mr. Ramirez's expression, and she seemed to think better of it. Without another word, she turned on her heel and left. Jordan sat there, heart still pounding, still catching up with the weight of everything happening. Mr. Ramirez turned back to him. Go back to class for now, Jordan, he said with a small, genuine smile. But be ready, because this is just the beginning. Jordan stood thanking him softly, and as he walked back down the hallway, something felt different, lighter. For the first time, it wasn't just about surviving the day, it was about what came next. By the next morning, whispers swirled through every hallway of Ridgewood Academy like wildfire. Did you hear the math department's having an emergency meeting? I heard it's about Miss Carter. Someone said the principal's getting involved. Jordan arrived at school with a strange mix of dread and curiosity twisting in his stomach. As he walked toward his locker, students he barely knew were nodding at him, offering high fives, even stopping to ask questions. Bro, what did you even do to her yesterday? You broke her, like, mentally broke her. That was legendary. Jordan forced a small smile but kept his head down. This wasn't about becoming a hero. This was about finally being seen. At lunchtime, Mr. Ramirez found him in the library. Jordan, he said, lowering his voice, the administration wants to speak with you after school. Principal Morris. Superintendent Keller will be there too. Jordan's stomach dropped. The superintendent, he echoed. Mr. Ramirez nodded. They're taking this seriously now. Not just because of your solution yesterday, but because several students have come forward. Jordan's heart skipped. Students who Jasmine, Raj from chemistry, even Caleb from the basketball team. All of them had stepped forward, finally, sharing their own stories of bias humiliation, unfair grading, and targeted discipline under Miss Carter. Mr. Ramirez pulled out a manila folder. This is a collection of statements from 12 students, he said. Jordan's eyes widened. 12, yes, Mr. Ramirez said, and more might come. For the first time in weeks, Jordan felt like he wasn't alone. Later that afternoon, Jordan sat in a conference room far bigger and colder than any space he'd been in at school before. Across the table sat Principal Morris, Superintendent Keller, Mr. Ramirez, and 3 members from the school board. Miss Carter sat at the far end, rigid, her usual confidence stripped away. Beside her was a lawyer, a woman in a gray suit who whispered constantly in her ear. Principal Morris cleared her throat. "Jordan, thank you for coming," she began. "We've reviewed footage from classroom cameras, spoken to multiple students, and cross-checked grade patterns from the past 3 semesters." She flipped through a report. "The data and the testimonies suggest a consistent pattern of targeted behavior, especially toward scholarship students and students of color." Ms. Carter's lawyer jumped in. "My client categorically denies any form of discriminatory behavior. Any disciplinary actions taken were based on academic performance and classroom management needs." Jordan felt his fists clench under the table. Mr. Ramirez spoke next. "With all due respect, the math speaks for itself. The statistical disparities, combined with student reports, show something deeply wrong here." Superintendent Keller nodded gravely. "We've also reviewed Jordan's academic performance. His independent work online contributions and yesterday's incident show he's operating at a far higher level than his current placement." She turned toward Jordan. "Jordan, effective immediately. We're placing you in the district's gifted and advanced mathematics program. You'll have access to university coursework, mentorship, and any accommodations needed to support your continued success." Jordan blinked, stunned. Before he could fully process, Principal Morris continued. "As for Ms. Carter, pending the outcome of a formal investigation, she's being placed on administrative leave." The room went silent. Ms. Carter's face drained of color. Her lawyer whispered furiously, but she barely reacted, staring at the table, motionless. Jordan's heart raced. After everything, the pain, the humiliation, the doubt, this was happening. Finally, something was changing, and for the first time, it was in his favor. 2 days later, Jordan found himself sitting in the school's largest conference room. This time, he wasn't alone. His grandmother sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. Her hospital scrub still smelled faintly of disinfectant, but her posture was strong, her gaze unwavering. Across the table sat the full school board, the district superintendent, 2 independent educational consultants, and, unexpectedly, Dr. Ellis from the State University's mathematics department. At the far corner, Miss Carter sat with her lawyer, her expression unreadable. Principal Morris began the meeting. "We're here today to formally evaluate both Jordan's academic abilities and review the extent of the concerns raised about classroom practices." Jordan's heart pounded. "Dr. Ellis has prepared a short, tailored assessment," the superintendent said. "This is not a punishment, Jordan. It's a chance for you to show, officially, what you're capable of." Jordan nodded slowly. A staff member wheeled in a portable whiteboard. Dr. Ellis stepped forward. "I've selected 3 problems," she said, smiling kindly at him. "One in calculus, one in linear algebra, and one in number theory." Jordan swallowed hard, but took the marker. As he approached the board, he could feel dozens of eyes on him. This time, they weren't looking for him to fail. They were watching, waiting, hoping to see something brilliant. Jordan exhaled and began. His hands moved with practiced ease. For each problem, he paused only briefly to organize his thoughts, then flowed into the solution like second nature. Chain rule, eigenvalues, prime distribution. Each answer appeared on the board neat and clear. When he stepped back, the room stayed silent for several long beats. Then, Slow applause. Dr. Ellis smiled wider. "Incredible," she said softly. "Honestly, remarkable." Jordan turned locking eyes with Miss Carter. Her face had gone completely blank, as though retreating deep inside herself. The superintendent cleared her throat. "We've also reviewed grading patterns across Miss Carter's classes for the past 4 years," she said. She flipped through a report thick with data. "The disparities in grades and discipline between minority students and white students are statistically significant and unacceptable." Ms. Carter's lawyer spoke fast. "My client maintains that her grading was based purely on merit," Dr. Ellis cut in. "Then explain why students like Jordan consistently underperformed in your class but excelled under other instructors and online platforms." The room grew heavier. Ms. Carter remained silent. Finally, Jasmine stood from the back of the room. "I'd like to say something," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "I watched Jordan suffer through this, watched all of us stay silent, watched Ms. Carter ignore him, target him, humiliate him. We should have spoken up sooner." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "We were scared, but we're not anymore." Other students nodded from the sidelines. Raj, Caleb, even Tyler, looking visibly uncomfortable but present, shifted in his chair, giving Jordan a subtle nod. The school board members exchanged glances. One of them spoke. "This isn't just about one teacher. It's about a culture. And it stops here." The superintendent turned back to Jordan. "We'll be recommending your placement into an advanced mentorship program starting immediately, with full district support." Jordan blinked, barely able to process. His grandmother squeezed his hand. "You did it, baby," she whispered. The air in the room felt different now. Lighter, stronger, like, finally. Change was happening. The following week felt like a blur. Jordan found himself juggling new responsibilities, new classes, and a whirlwind of attention he'd never experienced before. He started attending advanced mathematics seminars at the state university twice a week. Dr. Ellis had personally assigned him a mentor, a PhD candidate, who treated Jordan like an equal, not a curiosity. At Ridgewood Academy, the atmosphere had shifted. Miss Carter's classroom stood empty. A substitute teacher filled in, but students still whispered about what had happened. The school board sent out an official statement acknowledging past failures and announcing the launch of a new diversity and equity committee, where students like Jordan and Jasmine were invited to participate. Jordan sat with Jasmine at lunch for the first time. "So, when are you going to start tutoring us?" she teased. Jordan laughed. "Soon. Let me survive my university lectures first." Across the cafeteria, Tyler sat with his usual group, but today he glanced over and gave Jordan a hesitant nod. Jordan nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness, but maybe it was a start. At home, Jordan's grandmother hung his certificate from the school district's gifted program on the living room wall, right next to a faded photo of Jordan's father in his old college basketball jersey. "I wish he could see this," Jordan said softly. "He does?" she answered, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Trust me, your dad's grinning from ear to ear right now." They sat at the kitchen table that night talking about college plans, research opportunities, and what it felt like to finally be seen for what he was. Not just a kid from the East Side, not just a scholarship student, but a scholar, a mathematician, a force to be reckoned with. Weeks later, on the day of his first guest lecture at the university's mathematics department, a session where Jordan would help explain complex differential equations to undergrads, he stood at the front of the lecture hall and paused. Looking out over the room, he caught sight of a familiar face at the very back. Ms. Carter. Dressed plainly, hair pulled back, sitting quietly with a notepad in her lap. She didn't make eye contact, didn't say a word. But she was there, listening. Jordan felt a strange mix of emotions. He didn't owe her anything, not forgiveness, not sympathy. But maybe, in some distant, complicated way, she was starting her own journey too. He cleared his throat. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, voice strong, confident. "Today, we're going to solve something a little more interesting." The room fell silent, pens, ready, notebooks open. And with that, Jordan picked up the marker and began writing a new equation on the board, this time on his terms. As Jordan walked home that evening, backpack slung over one shoulder, the sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold and deep purple. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. Free from the weight of other people's expectations. Free from the constant fear of being too much or not enough. His story had started with humiliation, with standing alone at the back of the classroom, shoulders aching, heart heavy, trying to shrink himself just to survive. But now, he stood taller, not because he had something to prove, but because he knew, without question, that he belonged. In every lecture hall, in every classroom, in every room he walked into from this day forward. And while not every battle was over, and not every person would suddenly change, Jordan had taken the first, and perhaps the most important, step. He had chosen not to stay silent. He had chosen himself. Dear friends, if Jordan's story moved you, please take a second to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that brilliance comes in all shades, from all backgrounds, and sometimes it takes just one moment of courage to rewrite your story. And please, don't forget to subscribe. We're on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers, so we can keep sharing real powerful stories like this one. Because remember, genius doesn't discriminate. But sadly, people still do. Together, let's change that.